Is a person required to adhere to the halachic rulings of his community's or his shul's rabbi?
The simple and straightforward answer to that question is no. A person, an individual Jew, is not required necessarily to follow the halachic ruling of the rabbi of his community or of his shul. Obviously a Jew is required to follow halakha, but we all know that within the realm of halakha there are different views and different approaches. It also should be noted that we are not discussing here the type of situation that the Talmud Bavli discusses in Masechet Eruvin of a person who is always looking for the more lenient view, just as we should not be discussing, or we should not follow the approach that is unfortunately perhaps today too widespread, namely that one should always be looking and seeking the most stringent view. Halakha is about trying to get to the truth and to the bottom of a matter, and to make a correct and balanced decision based on all the sources and all relevant considerations. And therefore, and having said that, and because people, human beings, are not carbon copies of each other, and just as in any legal system or philosophical system, and Torah and Halakha are both really, one finds different positions and different outlooks and different leanings. There are obviously in the realm of Halakha different views. A community or a shul may nominate a rabbi to be the head of the community, and when it comes to matters pertaining to the community's structure and the way that it conducts its affairs, the way that the shul is run, the way the minyan is run, and what have you, things that pertain to the community as a whole, clearly the rabbi should be the one to call the shots. His word should be the final word. But with regards to a person's personal halachic practice and observance, things that apply to a particular person and not necessarily to his neighbor, this could be things that he does at home, how he runs his halachic life in his home. It could also pertain to even things that pertain to what he does in shul, but things which are of a private nature, which are not known to and do not need to be discussed by others and do not need to be noticed by others. In all such matters, a person has the right to be autonomous, just as a person can choose, therefore, to follow the shul's rabbi, and that is, he makes the decision to make that person his rabbi. A person can also choose to adopt and be in contact with another rabbi who may not be even in the community or in the same town or in the same country, but whose opinions carry weight in the eyes of this individual. And this is what the Mishnah tells us in Masechet Avot, Aseh lecha Rav. Choose for yourself a Rav, a teacher, who will be able to teach you Torah and also to give you halachic direction. And this statement of the Mishnah, which is directed at the individual, cannot be and is not countermanded or overturned by the fact that a community or a shul has a rabbi that is responsible for those affairs and facets of Jewish life which pertain to the communal life and the public policy, shall we say, of that community. Obviously, the reason this question is asked by many is because there is a tendency, a very unfortunate tendency, in many parts of the Jewish world today, whereby many rabbis demand absolute adherence to their halachic positions, their halachic rulings, or their customs even, not even halachic rulings, minhagim, customs, that all people in their community accept their position, even in their private lives, even in terms of, shall we say, hashkafa, in terms of philosophical outlook, ideologies on different issues, which cannot be, it cannot be claimed that ideologies fall within the purview of halachic debate. We all know that there are great Torah scholars, all of whom are expert in halacha, all of whom are dedicated, entirely dedicated and thoroughly to the Torah and thoroughly versed in the Torah, who adopt different ideological positions on certain issues. It is impossible for a rabbi to make the claim that everyone has to adopt my ideological position and that no one should be able to express a position different from my own. And yet we see that this is what not a few rabbis in different communities, both, I'm aware of such phenomena, both here in Israel and overseas, where some rabbis make such claims and demand such an authority over people. And unfortunately, I must speak frankly and say that I believe that in many cases such rabbis are motivated and driven by a kind of obsession with control over people's lives. And in other cases, very often, I think it has to do with being intimidated by and threatened by people in the community. Often we might be discussing very knowledgeable people, very intelligent people. They may not be the rabbi of their community, but they may be, for example, rabbis in their own right. They may be intellectuals. They may know a great deal. And many rabbis feel threatened by such people. They prefer, what they would like, in essence, ideally, would be to have a community of nice, little, well-behaved automatons, robots, who do exactly as they are told, who march like soldiers on order and turn left and right as directed, and really thinking critically and thinking independently and studying independently, in the eyes of some of these rabbis, is actually entirely superfluous and not at all desirable. In fact, it is something to be discouraged. This is a most unfortunate and intellectually dishonest approach. It is not a true reflection of Torah Judaism. This has to be stated plainly. Any Jew who is very much chagrined by such behavior, by such demands, and is essentially turned off the community or the rabbi or Judaism as a whole as a result of such demands and such claims, needs to know the truth, that this is not the way Judaism is supposed to work. I have become recently familiar with a number of such cases. In one case, a person here in Israel in a community, in a shul where he had been davening for many years and had been giving shiurim for many years within this community, and then a new rabbi came along who was not necessarily even of the same ideological bent as most members of that community. He essentially demanded that this person cease giving shiurim because some of his views and ideas did not square with his own. And this even came before a Beit Din. This entire issue became a legal battle between a Jew who was teaching Torah for years, and people were very happy with the shiurim he was giving, and very pleased, and a new rabbi who wanted to apply some form of thought control over his congregants. This is an entirely improper approach to the running of a community. People are allowed to study Torah and hear Torah and hear the views of different Talmidei Chachamim, whether or not the rabbi of that community agrees or does not agree with those Talmidei Chachamim. I have become similarly aware recently of 2 cases in the United States where people were literally driven out of their communities because they had studied and researched different things and had different views on certain issues, sometimes on quite amazingly trivial and ludicrous issues. For example, in one case I know of, a person who had studied the proper pronunciation of Hebrew, and for the record I might point out that this person did not learn about the correct pronunciation of Hebrew from me initially, but from other sources, and adopted this authentic pronunciation of Hebrew. And when he had done so and was called up to the Torah and pronounced the bracha according to that correct and authentic pronunciation, he was reprimanded by the rabbi and by the Rebbe, and in fact he was told that if you will not pronounce the bracha as I do, as we do, as most of us do, then we will not call you up to the Torah. The end result of this run-in, shall we say, with the rabbis of the community on this and similarly trivial and irrelevant issues. Believe it or not, another issue was how one wears one's talit. If one wears one's talit in the Sfaradi style, like that is to say, across the body, the width of the length of the talit is across the width of the body, or in the Ashkenazi style where it is sort of hitched up onto the shoulders. This was also considered by a particular rabbi to be an unacceptable deviation from normative halachic practice, which is of course so insane and inane that I don't believe I need to elaborate on the topic. I will just point out parenthetically that in all representations of Ashkenazi Jewish life in Europe going back 2, 3, 4 centuries, paintings in other words, I'm referring to paintings that represent, that depict the reality of Jewish communities some centuries ago in Europe, we see plainly that the Ashkenazim were wearing their talitoth exactly as Sfaradim and Temanim wear their talit, and not in the manner that is considered today more usual in Ashkenazi circles. That's just by the way. Of course, this issue is a non-issue, and the fact that such a person should be reprimanded and demeaned for acting in such a manner is really quite incredible. The upshot of this in this particular case was the person was literally driven out of the community and had to move to another part of town in order to join another community. And I'm aware of another person in that same community who was also driven out of that community, or who feels he has no interest and no desire to be part of that community any longer, and therefore has ceased going to shul in that community for similar issues, ideological and intellectual discussions and positions that he had with the rabbinical leaders of that community, where they refused to admit that his views were within the pale of Torah, which they clearly were. This led to a family distancing itself from the only Orthodox shul in the vicinity. Such behavior, such goings-on are a sham of Judaism, make a sham of Judaism, and they cause great harm to the name and the image of Torah Judaism, and people need to know that this is not Darka shel Torah.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message, and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.